Today, McDonald's is absolutely everywhere. I mean, whether you're walking the streets of New York, exploring London, or traveling through Tokyo or Dubai, you're almost guaranteed to stumble across those famous golden arches, right? It's literally one of the most recognizable brands on the planet. But it wasn't always this massive global empire. In today's Explainer, we're uncovering the untold story of how a tiny, single restaurant completely transformed into a worldwide phenomenon, and in the process, fundamentally changed how we think about business forever.
To really understand this, we have to pull back to the year 1940. We're in San Bernardino, California, where brothers Richard and Maurice McDonald just opened a small drive-in restaurant. Now, at the time, American car culture was absolutely booming, making drive-ins the ultimate place to be. And at first glance, the brothers' business looked like your standard, typical American setup. Customers would pull up, order their food, wait a while for their meals, and eventually have them delivered right to their car windows by car hops. It was completely normal. Which brings us to the central mystery of our explainer. How on earth did this perfectly standard, single-location drive-in conquer the entire world?
Okay, let's dive into this because the answer is actually going to surprise you. Do you thinking the secret to McDonald's massive success is simply having the absolute best-tasting hamburger in the world? Well, you're looking in the wrong place. The true secret of their global dominance lies completely beneath the food.
See, the traditional 1940s drive-in restaurant model was incredibly slow. They featured huge, sprawling menus, customers had to wait a remarkably long time for their orders, and behind the scenes, the kitchens were absolutely chaotic and just a nightmare to manage. The McDonald brothers realized this simply wasn't working. So, in 1948, they made a massive, highly risky decision. They temporarily shut the whole thing down. And when they finally reopened, almost everything was different. They completely ditched the huge menu and focused relentlessly on just a few highly popular items, basically hamburgers, French fries, and milkshakes.
But they didn't just change the menu. They completely redesigned the kitchen from the ground up to look and function exactly like a factory production line. They called it the Speedee Service System. Every single employee had a hyper-specific job. One person prepped the burgers, another handled the fries, a third poured the drinks. The goal was simple, but for that era, it was totally revolutionary. Make food faster, cheaper, and perfectly consistent. Customers could suddenly get their food in minutes instead of waiting around forever. The system was efficient, affordable, and most importantly, it changed fast food forever.
But as innovative as the brothers were, they weren't quite thinking big enough yet. And this brings us to the early 1950s and a salesman named Ray Kroc. Kroc sold milkshake machines for a living. Out of nowhere, one small restaurant in California suddenly placed an order for 8 of his multi-mixer machines. That meant they wanted the capacity to blend 40 milkshakes simultaneously. Now, for a single-location hamburger stand in 1954, that kind of volume was completely unheard of. Fascinated by who could possibly need that much equipment, Kroc traveled out to San Bernardino to see it for himself. And what he saw completely shocked him. Huge numbers of customers, incredibly fast production, and a kitchen organized like a literal factory.
Now, what's really interesting about this is that Kroc immediately saw something the original brothers hadn't fully realized yet. McDonald's wasn't just a successful, busy restaurant. It was a bona fide system, a perfectly organized method that could be replicated exactly, over and over again. And the beautiful thing about systems is that once they're perfected, they can be scaled infinitely.
Which brings us to the first major phase, the franchise expansion machine. That realization completely shifted the story from cooking food to copying a model. Kroc convinced the brothers to let him help expand McDonald's through franchising, and in 1955 he opened his own location in Des Plaines, Illinois. This was the turning point. Kroc wasn't simply selling hamburgers to customers in Illinois anymore. He was building a franchise expansion machine. The absolute core of his new business system was strict standards. Sure, a franchisee would operate the restaurant, but they had to follow the exact same basic menu, the precise cooking process, deliver the exact same customer experience, and use the exact same recognizable branding. Kroc realized that consistency was their absolute ultimate product. Whether you walked into a location in Chicago or California, you knew exactly what you were going to get.
From there, the scale-up was incredibly aggressive. You have the original drive-in in 1940, the pivotal Speedee system in 48, and Kroc's first franchise in 55. The momentum was just rapidly building. But 1961 was the true turning point. Ray Kroc completely bought out the McDonald brothers. Just like that, the founders were no longer in control of the company they created. This gave Kroc the absolute freedom to push expansion as fast and as far as humanly possible. By 1967, they hit their first international market in Canada, rapidly followed by Europe, Asia, and beyond. Because, well, more locations meant more customers, more sales, and a vastly stronger brand.
And this brilliantly illustrates how they managed that global leap.
International expansion is notoriously difficult, right? Different countries have wildly varying cultures, tastes, and eating habits. McDonald's survived this massive global push by mastering a very delicate balance. They maintained the rigid, global consistency of their recognizable brand while brilliantly executing local adaptation. In India, for example, they designed products entirely around local vegetarian preferences. In Japan, they developed specific products catering directly to Japanese consumers. The core brand identity remained rigidly the same everywhere you went, but the menu evolved to fit the culture perfectly.
So at this point, they're selling billions of burgers all over the world. But that brings us to a massive question, and honestly, perhaps the biggest plot twist of this entire explainer. How does McDonald's actually make its money? Well, it turns out selling French fries is only half the story. The answer lies in a really clever dual revenue stream. On one side, you have what happens inside the restaurant, the food sales. But on the other side, entirely beneath the restaurant, is a staggering real estate empire. See, McDonald's controls prime restaurant properties globally. Instead of corporate paying for every new restaurant, franchisees invest their own capital to operate under the McDonald's system. McDonald's then earns massive revenue through franchise fees and, most importantly, collecting rent on those properties. They benefit from the food sales happening inside for sure, but they benefit immensely from owning the land underneath. It is a highly scalable, brilliant machine for expansion.
Now let's move into our next section, more than just hamburgers.
Because a perfect operating system and a clever real estate model still need one more vital ingredient to actually conquer the globe. We have to peel back the final layer to understand the psychological core that glues this massive enterprise together in the minds of billions of consumers. McDonald's success is heavily driven by deeply ingrained psychological touchstones. Think about it. The iconic yellow golden arches, the Big Mac, the Happy Meal, that highly specific smell of their fries, the familiar packaging, Ronald McDonald, and of course that inescapable phrase, "I'm loving it." McDonald's understood something incredibly vital. People don't just buy food. They buy familiarity, they buy convenience, they buy an experience they already deeply understand and inherently trust.
Of course, no system survives for decades without immense pressure. As consumer preferences shifted toward fresher ingredients and healthier food, and as massive competition rose from places like Burger King, Wendy's, Subway, and KFC, McDonald's faced serious challenges. Not to mention the heavy criticisms over nutrition and environmental impacts, but the system proved its incredible resilience by actively adapting. They didn't just sit still. They introduced new menu options, rolled out mobile apps for digital ordering, installed those self-service kiosks we all use now, and heavily integrated delivery partnerships. The core system remained intact, but the technology running it was continuously upgraded.
To sum it all up, McDonald's became one of the world's biggest brands without behaving like a traditional restaurant company, because it's built on these distinct, powerful layers. The McDonald brothers started the whole thing by asking, how can we make food faster? Then Ray Kroc stepped in and asked, how can we copy this restaurant thousands of times via franchising? And ultimately, the company evolved to ask, how can we build an unstoppable business combining branding, technology, and real estate, where every single restaurant strengthens the entire empire?
So, the crucial point is that the story of McDonald's isn't truly a story about hamburgers at all. The most profitable innovation in the history of fast food wasn't a secret ingredient or a fancy recipe. It was the relentless power of a repeatable process. They proved that sometimes your real advantage isn't having a uniquely superior product, but creating a highly efficient system that works, and then making it work perfectly again and again and again.
And that is exactly how a tiny drive-in in California transformed into one of the biggest brands in the history of business. It really fundamentally shifts how you look at the seemingly simple businesses we interact with on a daily basis, doesn't it? Which leaves us with one final thought to consider as you go about your day-to-day. What other everyday, invisible systems are running the world around you, quietly scaling an empire without you even noticing?